Alistair adjusted the box in his arms, the cardboard digging into his skin as he took one last look at the gothic architecture of Preston Hall. The expulsion letter felt like a lead weight in his pocket, a verdict delivered without a trial. His roommate Brennan had offered a smug, pitying smile as he'd left, but what Brennan didn't know was that in the quiet of the university's IT department, a forgotten security camera from the hallway was about to be reactivated for a system-wide update, holding a single, damning clip from a year ago. We all hear stories about injustice, but what happens when the truth has been buried under lies for a whole year? Let's explore how a single piece of forgotten technology brought a powerful secret crashing down. The act itself had happened in the dead of night, nearly a year before Alistair would find himself carrying that box. The dorm room was quiet, save for the soft, rhythmic breathing of Alistair, who was fast asleep. He was exhausted. Midterms were brutal for everyone, but for a scholarship student juggling a full course load and a part-time dishwashing job, they were a special kind of hell. He'd finally collapsed into bed around 2 in the morning, his history textbook still open on his chest. From the other side of the room, Brennan watched him, his own face illuminated by the glow of his laptop. There was no exhaustion in Brennan's eyes, only a cold, calculating focus. He wasn't studying. He was waiting. Brennan's family had their name on 3 different buildings on this campus. He'd never had to worry about money, grades, or consequences. University was just a 4-year social event before he was handed a cushy job at his father's investment firm. Yet, for all his privilege, he couldn't stand his roommate. Alistair was everything he wasn't: disciplined, brilliant, and universally respected by their professors. He didn't just get good grades, he earned them through sheer force of will. And that quiet, unassuming success felt like a personal insult to Brennan. The final straw had been Professor Albright's lecture last week. Albright, the notoriously tough history professor, had held up Alistair's midterm paper as an example of truly exceptional, graduate-level analysis. He had barely glanced at Brennan's, which had been written by a paid service. The quiet praise for Alistair echoed louder in Brennan's ears than any direct criticism ever could. So, he had crafted a plan. It was simple, yet devastating. For the past week, he had been working on a paper for the same history class. He'd carefully copied entire paragraphs from an obscure academic journal he found online, the kind of source a desperate student might use, but not a brilliant one like Alistair. He then used a software to subtly change a few words, just enough to fool the university's basic plagiarism checker, but not enough to withstand human scrutiny. The final touch was the most devious. He had waited for Alistair to leave his laptop open and unattended for just a few minutes, long enough for him to create the document on Alistair's own machine, ensuring the file's metadata would trace back to him. Now, in the silence of the dorm room, it was time. Brennan quietly rose from his chair. He moved with a predator's grace, his bare feet making no sound on the worn linoleum floor. He held the printed copy of the plagiarized paper in his hand. Alistair's backpack was on the floor by his desk, unzipped from his frantic search for a pen earlier that evening. Brennan knelt, his heart beating a little faster, not with fear, but with a thrilling sense of power. He carefully slipped the paper into the front pocket of the backpack, tucking it beneath a folder of notes. It was done. He retreated to his bed, a cruel smile playing on his lips as he imagined the fallout. 2 days later, the trap was sprung. Alistair was pulled out of his chemistry lab by a stern-faced administrator and escorted to the office of Dean Covington. Brennan had already been interviewed that morning, after he had discovered the paper while helpfully organizing their shared desk space. He had played his part perfectly, expressing shock and disappointment in his roommate. When Alistair saw the paper laid out on the dean's polished desk, his blood ran cold. "I've never seen this before in my life," he said, his voice trembling. "This isn't my work. I would never do this." Dean Covington leaned back in his leather chair, his expression a mixture of impatience and regret. "Mr. Croft, the evidence is quite compelling. The paper was found in your possession. Furthermore, our IT department confirmed the document was created on your laptop 2 nights ago. Your roommate, Mr. Vance, is the one who brought this to our attention. He seemed quite distraught." The mention of Brennan felt like a punch to the gut. Alistair looked from the paper to the dean's unyielding face. Brennan, he found this? Sir, you have to believe me. Someone is setting me up. But his pleas fell on deaf ears. The university had a zero-tolerance policy for plagiarism. It was a clean, simple case. A model student cracking under pressure. It was a story they had seen before. Before the meeting was over, Professor Albright appeared at the door. He'd heard the rumors and had come straight to the dean's office. Covington, there has to be a mistake, Albright said, stepping into the room. His eyes were fixed on Alistair, who looked pale and broken. I've had Alistair in my class for 2 semesters. His work is impeccable. This isn't his style. It isn't his voice. It makes no sense. Frank, the dean said with a sigh, the evidence is digital and physical. Timestamps, location, possession. It's an open and shut case. I understand he's a promising student, which makes this all the more disappointing, but our hands are tied. Professor Albright tried to argue, pointing out the absurdity of a student like Alistair resorting to such clumsy plagiarism. He asked for a more thorough investigation, for a chance to look at the IP logs, to question Brennan more deeply. But the dean was firm. The case was closed. It would cause a scandal to drag it out, especially when the evidence was so clear. The university valued its reputation for swift, decisive action. Alistair was summarily expelled. He was given 24 hours to vacate his dorm room. The scholarship that had been his only ticket to a better life was revoked. He called his mother, a single parent who worked 2 jobs to keep their small apartment, and choked out the news. The silence on the other end of the line was worse than any yelling could have been. It was the sound of her dreams for him shattering. As he packed his few belongings into a cardboard box, Brennan came into the room. He placed a hand on Alistair's shoulder, his face a perfect mask of sympathy. Man, I'm so sorry this happened, he said, his voice dripping with fake sincerity. If you ever need anything, just let me know. Alistair shrugged his hand off, a cold fury rising through his shock. He didn't say anything. He couldn't. What was the point? He was a poor kid from the wrong side of town, and Brennan was a Vance. In a battle of his word against theirs, he never stood a chance. He just picked up his box and walked out, not looking back. That was the day his future died. A year drifted by, thick and suffocating like a fog. For Alistair, it was a year of humiliation and hardship. His expulsion for plagiarism followed him like a shadow, making it impossible to enroll in another university. The dream of a history degree was replaced by the harsh reality of working double shifts at a greasy diner, the smell of fried food clinging to his clothes and hair. He lived back at home, watching his mother grow more tired each day, the worry for him etched into new lines around her eyes. He felt like a failure, a ghost haunting the life he was supposed to have. He rarely spoke about what happened. The shame was too heavy a burden to share. Back at the university, Professor Albright couldn't let it go. Every time he saw Brennan Vance strolling across the quad, surrounded by his wealthy friends, a knot of unease tightened in his stomach. Brennan had gone on to win the history department's undergraduate award that year, submitting a paper that Albright found technically proficient but soulless. It lacked the spark, the passion, the unique insight that had defined Alistair's work. Albright had reread every essay Alistair had ever submitted to him. He compared them to the plagiarized paper, and the difference was as clear as night and day. Alistair's writing was eloquent and complex. The fraudulent paper was clunky and simplistic. It was a strong piece of circumstantial evidence, but it wasn't proof. He took his findings to Dean Covington once more, 6 months after Alistair's expulsion. He laid out the essays side by side on the dean's desk. Just look at this, Covington, he insisted. This is a different writer. Alistair Croft did not write that paper. The dean looked over the documents with a weary expression. Frank, I appreciate your dedication to your students, but this is a closed book. We can't ruin another young man's reputation based on your literary analysis. The Vance family are significant benefactors to this institution. Reopening this would be unwise. Let it go. The casual mention of the Vance family's influence confirmed Albright's worst fears. The system wasn't just blind, it was actively protecting its own. He had failed. He left the dean's office feeling defeated, the hope he'd been nursing for months finally extinguished. He had hit a wall, and there was nowhere else to go. Life went on. The seasons changed, and in the basement of the university's administration building, the IT department was finally getting around to a long overdue project, a complete overhaul of the campus security network. Miles of old coaxial cables were being replaced with fiber optics, and hundreds of outdated cameras were being swapped for new, high-definition models. A junior technician named Marcus was assigned the tedious task of decommissioning the old hardware in Preston Hall. He was working his way down a list of camera IDs, deactivating them one by one. He came to camera PH3BHW, located in the hallway of the third floor, B wing. According to his chart, the camera had been offline for over 18 months due to a faulty power supply. It was scheduled to be thrown out. Protocol required him to pull any salvageable footage from the local hard drive before wiping it. It was usually just a few days' worth of grainy, useless clips. He hooked the camera up to a diagnostic laptop and initiated the data transfer. As the files began to load, he noticed something odd. The camera hadn't been completely dead. The faulty power supply had caused it to work intermittently, kicking on for a few minutes at random times when the current fluctuated. It had recorded dozens of short random clips over the past 2 years. Marcus was about to wipe the drive when one of the file timestamps caught his eye. October 24th, almost exactly a year ago, at 2:47 a.m. The clip was only 3 minutes long. Out of sheer boredom, he clicked on it. The video was grainy and dark, but the image was clear enough. It showed the empty hallway outside dorm room 312. A few seconds into the clip, the door to room 314 across the hall opened, and a student, Brennan Vance, slipped out. He looked both ways down the empty corridor before quietly entering room 312, Alistair's room. He was inside for less than a minute. When he emerged, he had a faint, triumphant smile on his face. He disappeared back into his own room, and the clip ended. Marcus frowned. It was probably nothing. A student visiting his friend. But something about the secrecy, the time of night, felt off. He remembered hearing gossip last year about a cheating scandal in that exact dorm room. On a hunch, he cross-referenced the date of the video with the university's disciplinary records. He found it. Alistair Croft, resident of room 312, expelled for plagiarism on October 26th. The complaint was filed by his roommate, Brennan Vance. Marcus's blood went cold. This wasn't nothing. This was everything. He immediately picked up his phone and called his supervisor, his voice shaking slightly. "Sir," he said, "you need to see this. I think we have a very big problem." The call from the university came on a Tuesday morning. Alistair was on his break, sitting on a greasy stool behind the diner, scrolling through job listings on his phone. He didn't recognize the number, but he answered anyway. "May I speak with Alistair Croft?" The voice on the other end was formal and unfamiliar. "This is he," Alistair answered, his guard immediately up. "Mr. Croft, this is Dean Covington from the university. We need you to come to the campus as soon as you are able. There has been a significant development regarding the circumstances of your expulsion." The drive to the campus was surreal. Alistair felt like he was moving through a dream, a mixture of hope and dread churning in his stomach. He was led back to the same office where his life had been dismantled a year ago. This time, however, the atmosphere was completely different. Dean Covington stood to greet him, his face pale and grim. Professor Albright was there too, and he gave Alistair a look of profound relief and vindication. They didn't waste time with small talk. They played the video for him on a large monitor. Alistair watched the grainy footage of his former roommate sneaking into his room in the middle of the night. He watched the smug smile on Brennan's face as he exited. A year of pain, shame, and anger coalesced into a single moment of stunning clarity. He wasn't a failure. He was a victim. "The footage was discovered yesterday during a system upgrade," the dean explained, his voice heavy with regret. "It's undeniable proof that the evidence against you was planted." Brennan had been summoned to the office an hour before Alistair arrived. When confronted with the video, his arrogant facade had crumbled instantly. His denials turned to excuses, then to pathetic, blubbering pleas. He had confessed to everything: the jealousy, the calculated frame-up, the lies. His father had been called, and even his influence couldn't protect his son from this. Brennan Vance has been expelled, effective immediately, the dean continued. Alistair, on behalf of this entire institution, I offer you our deepest, most sincere apology. What happened to you was a catastrophic failure of our system and a grave injustice. He then laid out the university's offer, a full, public exoneration. His record would be wiped clean, his scholarship would be reinstated, retroactive for the year he had lost, and they would provide additional financial compensation for the damages to his reputation and the hardship he had endured. Alistair sat there, the dean's words washing over him. He looked at Professor Albright, who was smiling for the first time in what felt like a year. It was over. The fight he had been too broken to fight for himself had been won by the persistence of a good man and a stroke of impossible luck. The next week, Alistair walked back onto campus, not as a visitor, but as a student. The whispers and stares that had followed him during his last 24 hours there were replaced with looks of sympathy and respect. The story had spread like wildfire. Brennan was gone, a pariah who had left in the middle of the night. As Alistair walked toward the history building for his first class back with Professor Albright, he felt the weight of the last year finally lift from his shoulders. He was no longer a ghost. He was home. If you found yourself in Alistair's position, do you think you could accept the apology and return to the university, or would the memory of the betrayal be too much to overcome? Let us know your thoughts. Thank you for listening. If this story of justice served made an impact on you, consider sharing it. You never know who might need a reminder that the truth has a way of coming to light, even when it seems buried forever.